Beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, 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 boop. It's the machine. It's the man. Ryan Reynolds, Bradley Stalder. Another episode of Man versus Machine. This time, we're going to look into the 2025 rookie wide receivers and also talk about some of the big fantasy impact moves that could be coming in the next couple of days, hours, weeks, months. Ryan, this is a fun time. My phone was just going off during today. Like, I have a full-time, like, not that this is a fake job, but like fantasy job. And then I have a real job during the day, and my phone is exploding about DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much to say, but this is the outlet. This is the time, Ryan. This is an exciting time right before we get into big free agency. We just had the combine last week. There's a lot to process, a lot to digest, ruminate, go through the digestion process of almost like the cows, of the multiple stones, multiple stomachs, just letting it be crunched and rumbled around and go through that process. This is an exciting time, Ryan, and I'm happy to be doing this with you.
Yeah, man, we have complementary skill sets. I'm not a huge, how would I put it? I like some of the numbers that we'll talk about here, but like I put more stock into how these guys are on the field. So, but like this is my introduction to a lot of them, which I do on purpose. So I'm looking forward to this as well.
Well, we couldn't have come away from the combine without being impressed by some of the players. Of course, there were some letdowns, certainly, but I'm going to put out right at the beginning a player I was very impressed by that hadn't been getting a lot of chatter in the wide receiver streets. He's not gotten the draft capital projection that you think, but historically, this is a player that has some nice things in his favor, and that's Dante Thornton. Ryan, you're like, Dante Thornton, sure, Bradley. Not to be confused with Tyquan Thornton, who is a second-round draft pick of the New England Patriots. No, Dante Thornton ran a 4.3040 at the combine, a 99th percentile, 100th percentile speed score. This guy's 6'5", 205, Ryan. Holy buckets. Yes, out of Tennessee. And we know that Tennessee's offense is always questionable. You think of the Jalen Hyatts of the world. You think of the Cedric Tillmans of the world. But, I mean, Hyatt and Tillman were both day 2 picks, right? So this is a player that maybe needs to be a little bit more on our radar. He put some impressive numbers up at the combine, especially relative to history. So looking at the top 5 fastest 40-yard dashes for players 6'3" or taller, DJ Chark ran a 4.34. Julio Jones ran a 4.34. DK Metcalf ran a 4.33. Brian Thomas Jr. ran a 4.33, and Dante Thornton 4.30. Fastest player 6'3" or taller. Ryan, some team is going to be tantalized by speed and size, and Thornton put that on display at Tennessee. Number 1 in yards per reception and number 2 overall in yards per route run. So,
yeah, no, I mean, you can't teach speed, you can't teach size, so that's interesting. For me, this time of year, I try to go into everything blind. Like, I don't even know. I don't watch college football at all during the regular season. I start and usually the film for these guys isn't even available until after the combine because like I don't care about highlights. I want to like watch the full games because failure is where you learn more. So, that's a name that I'll look at. You don't need him to be a complete receiver. Like when DK Metcalf was drafted, he wasn't a complete receiver. He just was big and ran in a straight line fast. So, if he goes to a clever team, like if he went to Kansas City, for instance, or Buffalo, that's fascinating stuff.
I love it. I love it. Biggest letdown. I was out on Isaiah Bond. I knew a lot of people were big in on Isaiah Bond. We're going to talk more about Bond. But he confirmed what I was thinking, but I think he let down pretty much the entire fantasy community who was trying to push him up and make Isaiah Bond a thing. And like the hype surrounding him was so large. I think that was one of the biggest letdowns from a wide receiver perspective, that he tried to set himself up on such a high pedestal. I think it's a letdown, not for me personally, because I was low on him, but from like the whole, the market's perspective, I think that was a big letdown, Ryan.
Yeah, I'll talk about him more when we bring him up later. But for me, I just wish Ibuka ran. Like I would love to see what his 3-cone is. Him running at his pro day is a different scenario. Like I hate it when guys like that do. I get it from a business perspective and all of that kind of thing. But if I could have dipped my magic wand on something that didn't happen this weekend, or last weekend rather, I would have liked to see what he can do.
Yeah. We'll keep her moving. Matthew Golden, Ryan, runs the fastest 40 in 2025. There's a lot of chatter that Golden is now the darling of the 2025 class, that he could be the wide receiver one, that some teams are talking about Golden over McMillan. Are you buying that Golden will be drafted higher than Ted McMillan in the 2025 draft?
I don't think he should be, but he can be, just because, again, speed is one of those things you can't teach. I think his play speed's worse than what he ran at the combine. I'll say that. I think Chris Olave is a fair comp, where good player, I don't quite see great player there. So, but again, this isn't the most loaded draft class that we've had. So I think it's at least, I wouldn't do it personally. And again, I'm sure we'll talk about McMillan later, but I wouldn't take Golden ahead of him. But someone may, especially with the Raiders, especially with someone like the Raiders sitting there at 6. I mean, they're probably veering towards being a better ran organization going forward, but they're the sort of team that would take him first.
The Raiders, speaking of the Raiders, there's been a lot of chatter. I know that this is mostly a wide receiver show, but the Raiders are connected to trade partners surrounding Michael Mayer. And as a Notre Dame guy who thought that Michael Mayer did not get a fair shake last year, or even 2 years ago, that he deserves a fresh start. And I don't care if it's New England, I don't care where it is. Get Michael Mayer. He's a starter on 20 other teams, right? Yep. So agreed. Get me Michael Mayer off of the Raiders. I've been buying him everywhere. I took him in like the 22nd round of my like hardway draft, $250 entry team, like very late, a player that I think is worth taking dart throws on. Any thoughts on Michael Mayer?
Yeah, no, I love that. I thought the landing spot in general was bad to begin with, and then they take Brock Bowers. Like, my God, I felt Laporta and Mayer were neck and neck talents. So if he went to a team, like even if he went to the Giants and the Giants get an actual NFL quarterback this year, if he was a top 15, top 12 tight end going forward, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, that just as a fighting I got my Notre Dame polo on. Like I think I've watched Rudy probably 100 times so far in 2025. This is like my lifeblood, Ryan. We need to get Michael Mayer freed. Free Michael Mayer. I will start the protests. I will start petitioning for executive orders freeing Michael Mayer from the bonds of the Las Vegas Raiders. Isaiah Bond, I mentioned him as one of the letdown players. His hype balloon got majorly popped. He still put up a 94th percentile 40-yard dash. Like, it's nothing to scoff at. But a 53rd percentile speed score. He's 5'11", 180. He's a smaller guy. Is he closer to a Xavier Worthy player or an Anthony Schwartz player?
That's a great question. That's tough.
I know I got a good question when Ryan has to grunt.
No, that's tough. That's tough.
That was like a guttural, deep stomach sourced grunt.
I think the answer's closer to Worthy, but he's not close to Worthy. Where it's like, if we're talking about like percentages, he's like, and Worthy's 100%. Schwartz is 0%. He's like 52%. He's slightly towards the worthy. If he had like an Alec Pierce type career, I could see that. I do think his play speed was better than the speed he ran. Like I thought on the field, him and Golden were actually very close in terms of like straight line speed with pads on, and it is a difference. But I think he's a complimentary player. Isn't he the guy who said he was going to be the fastest player ever?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's why Xavier Worthy was trying to clown him on Instagram.
Yeah. That.
See, your boy follows people on social. Like I'm in the know. Look, here we go.
No, I thought that was him because when I was watching, I was like, I don't know how this guy thought he was the fastest receiver ever to play the game. Confidence is wonderful, but that was I wish I could have bet against that going into it.
Yeah, easy no. Easy no to Isaiah Bond. I am not very optimistic about Isaiah Bond. The reason why I use the Anthony Schwartz comp is because I expected him to be very, very fast. I expected that, but my concern was that there was. So I had to write some of the rookie profiles. I got the opportunity to, and he struggled to produce at Texas after he transferred. He spent 2 seasons at Bama. I thought he was undersized, underutilized. He saw 3 or fewer targets each of his 4 final games of the season, like just phased out of the offense. And that's not what you want to see from a player. I'm sorry. Like I want to see college players continue to grow and improve and get better. I just didn't see that in the college production throughout his career. Like we were expecting, he will improve. He will get better. He will. There's a new opportunity. He's no longer on at Bama. He's transferring. Now he's on Texas, where you've got some pretty strong quarterback prospects from the college perspective. But he just phased out, Ryan. I'm very concerned that the college production was just simply not there.
Yeah, he's not a complete receiver. He's essentially a guy where he'll see bubble, smoke screen on occasion, and like you'll give him a stop and go, which is why I think an Alec Pierce type career might be in store. Like that might be his ceiling, where he catches 4 balls for 80 yards every once in a while. So yeah, it's not a ton of enthusiasm for him going forward.
Not a ton of enthusiasm. So our boy Johnny Tuma, shout out to Tuma, interviewed Trey Harris. And he kind of put Jonathan Mingo in a body bag, essentially saying, Trey Harris, you're a big-bodied Ole Miss wide receiver. Do you envision your career being how do you get your career to become more like A.J. Brown and less like Jonathan Mingo? And our boy Trey Harris was like, well, of course, like I want to be dedicated and consistent, blah, 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 blah. He put up, he said the good words, but Ryan, we've seen these big-bodied Ole Miss wide receivers, A.J. Brown, Mingo, DK Metcalf, all come through with early draft capital. What has led to their success compared to, maybe a Jonathan Mingo falling off? Was it just simply landing spot, or were there other tools that were missing? And you think that Trey Harris has more of the complete package?
Good question. I love this question, actually. He's a guy, because again, I go into this stuff blind. Like I need someone to give me the names. Then I look at him. He's a dude that I'll watch probably 3 times more than most receivers in this class. I really like Trey Harris. DK Metcalf, to turn the clock back a little bit, ran really well in a straight line, really big and really fast. Greedy Williams from LSU completely shut him down in college. Metcalf did beat up Alabama. He's become a more nuanced route runner. He's still not a great route runner, but a more complete receiver than he was. But he was just an athletic freak. He probably shouldn't have slid in as far as he did, given that. A.J. Brown was a better overall receiver. I think I see some A.J. Brown. I see some Brown and Harris, especially with how they catch slants, the way they get yak. You could also say there's a little bit of Treylon Burks there too, if you want to. I think Harris has better hands than Treylon Burks and a better contested catch player. But I see some A.J. Brown there. He's not as diesel as A.J. Brown, where basically Brown and Terrell Owens are the 2 most ripped wide receivers I can think of off the top of my head. I didn't like Mingo coming out. Like the only reason I had any interest in him in best ball or anything was draft capital and like opportunity. But I wasn't a huge fan of him coming out. I'd be surprised if Harris had a Mingo type career. But generally speaking, Bradley, Metcalf and Brown are athletic specimens where Mingo really isn't.
No, not at all. There were weren't there like Deebo Samuel comps for Mingo at one point? Like, no one is the next Deebo Samuel. No. Like, that's the thing is.
Yeah, you'd have to make a running back the next Deebo Samuel.
You're looking for the next Cordero Patterson, you know, like, come on now. Yeah. Trey Harris put up 1,000 yards receiving in 8 games last year. He was number 1 among all receivers in yards per route run. Second, Dante Thornton Jr. Let's go, baby. Yards after the catch per reception. Thornton Jr. was second. And then you have to scroll down a little bit to get to Trey Harris, who was 28th. So, you know, maybe there's a little bit something for Dante Thornton. I'm just trying to put people's minds back onto Dante Thornton because he's going to be a draft pick for me in some of these late rookie rounds. We'll see if there's one team. All it takes is one team to be a believer in a Dante Thornton. We'll keep moving from like one end of the spectrum of, you know, size to the complete opposite end. Tez Johnson. I'm sorry, there was a bug like dive bombing me in the basement, Ryan. I just like freaked out for a second. Tez Johnson, small, tiny, and ran very slow. An unimpressive speed score for Tez Johnson in the combine. But Tank Dell didn't put up a great speed score. So is Tez Johnson going to project more of Tank Dell, or is he going to get nerfed and become more of a Rondell Moore?
Oh, man. When I first watched Johnson, he reminded me of slower Devonta Smith from like a body type standpoint. He's thin. Yeah. His 3-cone, though, is crazy. Like, you know, it's... Speed's great, obviously. You know that you know take the top off speed. You know, and then if a coach like Mike McDaniel uses you like he used Tyreek Hill, like you know, you can really do a lot of things. But the 3-cone, it's when JSN came out, I wasn't in love with JSN as a player on the field, but when I saw his 3-cone, I was like, all right, I'm going to triple check this now. You know, like to see. Right. Because that's, you know, one of the ways you can make margin is either am I faster than you where you can't catch me, or can I turn on a dime and create margin that way? So just from his crazy 3-cone alone, I'm interested. So I'll put him much closer to Tank Dell because of that.
I think so too. There are reasons for optimism, that cone, the agility, and also the burst. 83rd percentile burst score, a 4.51 is fine. And yes, the speed score is 2nd percentile because he's 5'10", 154. But he's got, despite a 5th percentile arm length, has a 54th percentile catch radius, Ryan. Like, he compensates. And that's one of the things that really stands out to me in terms of like evaluating players who are outliers. Like they're physical outliers, usually smaller, means they have to compensate somewhere. And that means that Tez Johnson has to compensate with burst and agility and catch radius to compensate for being smaller, for being literally like his arms are shorter. Like that's just, he's a smaller guy with shorter arm lengths. Like he's got to compensate. And so that's what we want to find is elite opposite end of the bell curve traits when you have the other side being also single digit percentile. Like we want to see that. And that's what Tez Johnson is showing, that he is able to compensate for some of those deficiencies. I agree with you. I like Tez Johnson as a Tank Dell comp.
Yeah. One thing I'll say is a younger, less gray Ryan Reynolds. He got caught by ignoring catch radius in the past. Like Anthony Miller was a guy that I really liked, but his catch radius was you know the size of the screen. It wasn't very large. Yeah, you had to hit him in the chest, otherwise he was done. So I'll keep an eye on that too. That's an interesting point. Here's the other thing, Bradley. I think because you know NFL teams, you know the league's always evolving. Running back production was the most replaceable for a long time. I think slot production's next. I think that's where you can create margin. Like, do you need to pay Amon-Ra St. Brown $20 million a year to essentially run crossers? I don't think you do. Is Brown better than Tez Johnson? Sure, of course. But you get a guy like this. You know, I always use Cole Beasley as the example. You get a guy like this with the short area quickness. He can be productive in the right spot. But, you know, like if he goes to the Colts, though, Brad, with Anthony Richardson throwing the ball, he's going to be useless.
There's a lot of players that are going to be useless if Anthony Richardson sticks around as the quarterback. Yikes. Woof. Well, we're going to talk about a few more rookies, but first, we've got a little bit of information about Fast Draft.
I am proud to announce that Fast Draft now has an all-defense game called D-Up. That's right, fans of IDP finally have a real money best ball game that they can play. No more manually setting up leagues every time you want to do a draft. No. Now you can play for 10 grand, 2,000 to first. Could draft up to 30 teams, all defense. And the best part, balanced scoring, tackles for loss, pass breakups. It all factors in. Just draft 6 defensive players, top 4 into your lineup every week. It's that easy. It's so easy that this isn't just for IDP people. If you love the NFL, then you'll love this game. And for the first time with Fast Draft, you can sweat both sides of the ball on Sunday. So use your host's promo code to get a $25 deposit match, and you'll love this D-Up contest because it's about time we got one.
There we go, Ryan. It's about time that we got defensive players. And we're gonna go out of order a little bit in the show sheet, Ryan, because we'll talk about a player who might be defensive, he might be offensive. It's Travis Hunter. He's one of the most polarizing prospects in NFL draft history that I can think of since I've been watching the draft, since I've gotten into fantasy in a larger way. A lot of teams do view him as a two-way player. Do you believe that this will hurt his fantasy value, and is he a risk at wide receiver 58, given that that risk is built into his price? Do you agree that his fantasy value is teetering right now?
Oh, he's super risky, but now the cost is appropriate. We'll talk about these guys later, but like Keon Coleman ahead of him, I think is fair. I think he's in the right spot where I would take him. I don't want to say I'd auto click him, but I'm willing for him to put up goose eggs every week just because of the upside. I said this the last time we talked about Hunter. He is a better corner than a receiver. I believe he worked out at the combine as a corner too. The idea of him wanting to play both sides 100% of snaps I don't think that's going to be possible, And I think the right fit for him is either one of two things. Either you're an every down wide receiver and you play high leverage spots at corner, or you do the opposite and you play high leverage spots at receiver. And I think that's probably what happens. That said, I've also said this, Brad. If I was his agent, wide receivers make more money, so I'm telling him to play wide receiver. So, but yes, I'm in where he's at now. I'm willing to for that to explode, bomb if he plays corner.
And that's why, Ryan, I was out on Travis Hunter for some time, because if the NFL is telling you, hey, we want you to be a cornerback, that must mean that the teams believe he is better at being cornerback at a disproportionate level compared to how much money the wide receivers make compared to the cornerbacks. It was something like, I don't know, the top 5 wide receivers are making like $5 to $10 million more per year than the top 5 cornerbacks. So I agree with you. He's a player that I'm willing to take clicks on, given that the price has dropped since the cornerback declaration. But there are teams that are looking, and I think it's worth taking that click, because a team might look at Travis Hunter and say, you know what, this is a player that we want to see more of at the NFL level, at game speed. What is he actually going to do for us on the field? Is he going to just be a cornerback? Is he going to thrive in that role? Or is he more valuable to us as a wide receiver for how our team is constructed? And we could see that shift throughout the NFL season, in my opinion. Like, you could see an NFL team experiment almost throughout, like, let's say the first half, they're like rotating him in and out and in and out. And then maybe during the second half of the season, after the bye week, possibly they say, you know what, we are going to play Travis Hunter at wide receiver, just moving forward. It's very possible that a team just declares that.
I love that, because, if he goes to New England, they're exactly in that bind. Like, do you have him play corner, or does he become Drake May's top wide receiver? And just from a pure logic standpoint, seeing if that works, him being May's top target, that makes the most sense. Where if he goes to the Giants, I think he makes the biggest difference is playing, number one corner, because then he'll make Banks a better 2 corner, so they'll upgrade at 2 spots, and then the high leverage spots on offense. It's fascinating. It is. He might be. I don't know if polarizing is the right word. Maybe it is, but he's definitely the guy where both make sense. And I think he's a top 10 pick in both too. I think he could walk right in the league and be a top 3 corner, where like 3 years from now, he's the best corner in the league. I think that's where if he ended up better than Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, I'd be pretty surprised.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. But a player who's also wide receiver and getting mocked in the top 10 in many of these not just fantasy, like real NFL, NFL.com, all of these places that are not fantasy focused, but instead NFL draft focused. A lot of Ted McMillan, T-Mac love for a player who there's a wide range of outcomes for Ted McMillan. There's been a lot of hate on this class. Some people have put Ted McMillan even after the Travion Hendersons, Quinshon Judkins, Amarion Hamptons, like he would be player 5 in fantasy because of the concerns that he's just not a full player. But if he gets top 10 draft capital, that's very interesting. That's sponsorship. Like worst case scenario, he becomes like a Roma Dunze in year 1. But the upside is Davante Smith in terms of production, right? And so when we talk about like a Ted McMillan getting mocked as a top 10 player, there's a lot of green grass between now, March 5th, and the last week of April or so when the NFL draft is occurring. Do you think that McMillan holds on to this projected draft capital as a top 10 player?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I think how you framed it is spot on too. It's very similar to how I see this. From a player, I love player comes because it puts like ideas directly in your head. My first impression was from a contested catch standpoint, at least, Cortland Sutton popped up to me a little bit because Sutton had atrocious quarterback play in college. So did McMillan to a degree. Like there were passes that were 25 yards downfield that were in the air for 3 months, and he made some plays on them. So that was impressive, succeeding despite terrible quarterback play. I see a bit of Michael Thomas in him too in breaking routes. He's fluid, consistent. I like him. Some Drake London's in there too. I think he's a little bit more physical than Drake London in contested catch situations, but if he went somewhere between like 8 and 12, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And when you mentioned a Dunze specifically, if a Dunze was in this class, I'd be thinking about them in the same bucket right now. So okay. I think he's, at least a guy who belongs in the conversation for being a top 10 pick.
All right, Ryan, we'll shift gears here, give the people what they want. There's been a lot of rumblings, and I mentioned at the start of the show, DK Metcalf on the trade block. Now Tyler Lockett is cut from Seattle Seahawks. There's a lot to look at in terms of how Seattle's receiving core could shift significantly over the next couple weeks, but we'll focus on a couple other players as well. Cooper Kupp, his ADP keeps sliding. He's plummeted to wide receiver 48 in early drafts. And a trade seems likely. Les Snead, the GM, came out today and said, look, is the possibility that Kupp stays with the Rams 0? No, but extremely unlikely is it seems to be how I'm reading the situation from the Rams GM, that it looks like they're done with Kupp unless like some miracle happens. Do you think that Kupp is broken? Like he's on the wrong edge of the apex, he's hurt pretty regularly, or does he have like one more bounce back season in him?
My answer is yes, and sort of. I don't think we're ever seeing, Jerry Rice production from Cooper Kupp ever again, but could he be a value add for a young team? Like if he went to the Patriots, for instance, say the Patriots trade for DK Metcalf and they sign and release Cooper Kupp. Do I think he could be useful there until he gets hurt? Yeah, I think that could make sense. But no, I don't think he's going to be a major factor like he's been in the past. His best shot to be that is probably if he stays with the Rams. You know?
Yeah, Stafford is the kingmaker. We know that, but I think the king in LA is Puka Nacua.
For sure.
You mentioned DK Metcalf possibly getting traded to the Patriots. There's connections of Metcalf to the Patriots, as you mentioned. The Packers, my Packers might go Pack go, but also the LA Chargers. The Chargers have been interested in Metcalf reportedly since last year. So Ryan, I know it's not on the show sheet, but where's the best landing spot for DK Metcalf?
If you would have asked me this before, because I forget about the Chargers too often. They're just like tucked away. It would have been Buffalo, but the Chargers, Justin Herbert has, if anyone can equal Josh Allen in terms of arm strength, Herbert's at least close. He's never had a deep speed burner. And I'm not even sure Metcalf qualifies that exactly, but he definitely would be the closest thing Herbert's ever had. And, I forget his name, McConkey. He's a perfect skill set complement to Metcalf. So that would be wonderful all around. I kind of hope he goes there.
That would be very, very exciting. Another big wide receiver could be on the move. Is on the move. Davante Adams officially released. That means he's a free agent. He can sign with anybody right now. Anybody. 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Best, worst landing spots. What team do you think can squeeze the most out of a 32-year-old Davante Adams, who, look, he's on the wrong side of the age apex, of course, and he's had his injuries here and there, but we know that he's still very dangerous. Is he like DeAndre Hopkins from 2 years ago?
No, I don't think he's quite there yet. He was still a good player towards the end of last year. I'm gonna segue. I'm gonna mesh some concepts here because I didn't talk about this since you mentioned the Packers. The reason I wouldn't want Metcalf to go to the Packers, I think that would be a great move for football purposes, but they're a spread the ball around offense. I don't think he'd get fed. Same with Adams. If he went there, I don't think he'd get fed.
Agreed.
I think the worst spot for fantasy would actually be if the Giants sign Aaron Rodgers and force Davante Adams. And it's not because it will hurt Adams. It's because it's going to ruin Malik Neighbors like Garrett Wilson was ruined. The best spot the best realistic spot might be Pittsburgh if Rodgers also goes there and, completely ignores the existence of Arthur Smith, which I'm sure he would. I'm sure that would be part of his contract. Listen, Arthur Smith, you're rich. That's fine. I don't care what you say. I'm doing what I want. And, it would probably work. So I think that's the scenario that's best for him. Moving him completely away from Aaron Rodgers. Maybe if he goes to Arizona with Kyler Murray, I think that would be sneaky interesting. Maybe it takes some pressure off Marvin Harrison. Lets him develop a little bit with a guy who maybe can still command number 1 priority coverage. So I think that would be a sneaky interesting spot for him.
I like that landing spot. Plus, it's a dome. Arizona plays the majority of their games in a dome, and that's, I think, better for an aged wide receiver, just not playing in the elements. That allows him to just play longer. It's better. Yep. Okay, so Adams moves. Right now, Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 14 in ADP. Is Garrett Wilson a buy low target, or is this the right price for a Garrett Wilson, a 2-3 turn type of player?
It's probably the right price, but I'm buying at that price with this caveat. Like, let's say the Jets bring in Jameis Winston. You're doing handstands if you're taking Garrett Wilson, at the 2-3 turn.
Pants all the way off, Ryan.
I don't know what they're going to do though. So there's definitely risk and there's definitely some scary stuff going on there, but he's the only game in town now. So I'm willing to take that shot where he's at.
Oh, for sure. Garrett Wilson 2 years ago, 30% target share. And even a 26% target share last year with Davante Adams side by side, and like not having the rapport with Aaron Rodgers, like that was clear that Garrett Wilson just simply didn't have it. But Wilson has that's why, like, it was very clearly Wilson over Olave, even though they had, similar profiles coming out of college. The target commanding was just higher for Garrett Wilson. Yeah. So give me Wilson as if there's a wide receiver who has pathway to be a top 5, Garrett Wilson has that.
Sure. Agreed. 100%.
Chris Godwin expected to walk in free agency. Of course, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the most ideal world would like to have Chris Godwin back, but he left. He was out for the majority of the year with an injury. Will he be ready for 2025 even if he re-signs in Tampa? Like, how much trepidation should we have for drafting a player like Chris Godwin, who, yes, was injured, but also was, in my best ball value rating, a top 8 player in a per game basis last year?
Yeah, he was crushing it. Jordan Vanek loved him. Jordan, we should actually probably have Jordan on one day to talk about wide receivers, but he was on Godwin last year because of the scheme fit. So, my fear is, one, again, the in-breaking route runners. I don't think Chris Godwin's like a wonderful talent. I just think he's been very productive and he's good at what he does. But does he sit on the shelf for the first 4 to 8 weeks? Maybe. But here's the thing, Brad. If essentially the Bucs and the Rams swapped Godwin for Cooper Kupp, I think that would be fascinating for both guys. I think that would be interesting. But the spot that would really, really, really intrigue me is if he went to Carolina. Bryce Young really came on last year, so yes. Same system that they have in Tampa. I think that would be interesting. But again, like you said,
you give me the chills, Ryan. Give me the chills.
How long does he sit on the shelf? Is the question.
Sit on the shelf until Adam Thielen falls off the shelf. There you go. That's
true. That's true.
There you go. Well, unless Jalen Coker, is the real deal, which he might be.
We'll see. We'll see.
We will see.
You're right. You're right about Thielen, though. He blocks Godwin.
Yeah,
he does. He blocks.
Yeah, he does. This guy sucks. Comments: Chris Godwin in the Mingo role. What, sitting on the bench, traded to the Dallas Cowboys?
Yeah, when you take a guy in the second round, then trade him for a 4th, and people think that you ripped off the team that got him. That's not a great sign.
Yikes! Shout out Lucas. There we go. So look, T. Higgins. He's tagged again, Ryan. I know that the Bengals, they're in their ideal world. They want to extend Hendrickson. They want to extend Chase. They want to extend Higgins. That's the reports right now, that they want to do these things. But also we have a history of the Cincinnati Bengals being cheap.
A poorly ran organization. Yeah.
I mean, yes, this is true.
Yeah.
I think that the Bengals get it done. I do think that all 3, they eventually get done. It's just a bunch of posturing and, oh, we're so far apart. Oh, we're going to try to get the best deal. Oh, stop. At the end of the day, all 3 players are going to get their money. But specifically with T. Higgins, how much should we worry about his injury history impacting not just the upside? Because I think Higgins is a great upside pick. Last year, he was the number 2 receiver in terms of top 5 weeks, rate of top 5 weeks, only behind Jamar Chase. But that was because he played fewer games. We've seen over the course of multiple seasons, soft tissue issues be the major concern for Higgins. The hamstrings, those tend to just continue to tear and rip and pull. And for a big player like him, he's going to take hits on contested catches. How much are you factoring in the injury history and concern into whether you're drafting him in 2025?
I definitely am. I'll say this, in a traditional season-long redraft, he's borderline on the I don't want anything to do with him list, because he's a nightmare to deal with when you have to figure out if you're going to play him or not. Where in best ball, when he plays, great. But if I draft him in best ball, I'm probably taking an extra receiver in that scenario. Say I have a 5'8" build at running back and wide receiver. I might stick a 9th receiver when I have T. Higgins on my team,
Ooh.
and go short on tight end or something. But Yeah, I mean, Joe Burrow basically publicly threatened the franchise, like, listen, I need my guys.
Right.
Or I'm going to be very unhappy. And if he's on, what's he going to do? Ask for a trade himself? And every team in the league but Kansas City, Buffalo, and Baltimore is going to be in. So you have to keep him happy. They're, you know what it is? It's like what the Colts did to Andrew Luck, essentially. It's like, can you please just build a winning team around Joe Burrow? Can you please stop playing games like you called them cheap? Like, just, yes, for fantasy purposes. In tournaments, I'm fine with it because you have to lean into some of uncertainty to create upside. So I'm fine with that. But if I'm drafting one redraft team, like he's almost off the board for me at his current ADP.
Yeah, that 2-3 turn is real tough to invest so much draft capital in that type of player. But a cheaper player who also has a history of injury was traded recently. Deebo Samuel goes to the Washington Commanders. How do you think this affects San Francisco's offense? Does this hurt anyone in Washington? And has Deebo's best football been in the past? Can he replicate his success from San Francisco?
Let's answer that in reverse. Yes, I think his best football's past. One of the things that's tough with football, and you know this because you're a news guy, how hurt was he last year? How big of a factor was that on him? Because he completely fell off in the second half. Just was a non-factor. So that's scary. Usually when smart teams get rid of guys, it's not a great sign. He's an interesting fit in Washington because Cliff Kingsbury created a fascinating running game, and that's where I think he's interesting. I don't think he hurts Terry McLaurin at all. I don't think that's the thing at all. Maybe he helps Jaden Daniels some. He makes the running game more dangerous. They're I'll call them extra wide receivers. I wouldn't even, they need to be replaced for the most part. So,
Olamide Zaccheaus nerfed.
Yeah. I'll say this about him, Olamide. His last name, I'll botch more than anyone's, but he is quick. Like, he's a good role player. Like, him and Samuel splitting time to a degree makes sense to me. Now, in San Francisco, they drafted Ricky Pearsall for a reason. I think he's the primary beneficiary. I've never thought Brandon Ayuk's should be a top 5 paid player at the position. I don't think he's good though. I think Pearsall benefits the most. Happy for Juwan Jennings, who they also paid a fortune, which, he paid off last year on that, but I was surprised when they gave him that kind of contract. But they're preparing for this. Smart organizations, they usually make moves with a year ahead in mind. The Eagles do this. I learned this from Joe Banner. So I think the 49ers will be fine, at least as far as Samuel's concerned.
Yeah, so Pearsall, you would say, is the player that you would take in the San Francisco wide receiver room. Yeah, he was still recovering last year from being shot.
Yeah.
He was shot, and he still played football last year, Ryan. That's wild stuff. Jennings would put up some pretty nice efficiency metrics last year. He certainly has the upside. We saw a 40-point fantasy game from him this year, but Ayuk might miss some of the start of the season as well, and that's concerning from not only an actual fantasy perspective, but also we've seen Ayuk put in the doghouse by Kyle Shanahan. We've seen guys just not attack their recovery in that way, and the concern is that, well, we need this guy. We're paying him a lot of money. Are we just going to slow play him on the way back? And that would be disastrous for fantasy, even with Ayuk going in the wide receiver 30s right now.
Yeah. If I could turn injuries off in football, I would.
Thanks, Ryan.
Oh, no.
We'll just toggle it off. There we go. We're all set. Thanks, Ryan.
I could spend so much less time, diving into stuff for bets and things like that. That's the reason, because I know the starters pretty much inside and out for the most part. But when we're getting to tier 2 backups, I don't. It's only so many hours in a day, so I wish we could turn them off.
Lucas in the chat, have we covered what happens at JSN when DK Metcalf leaves? Because Lucas says that he can see a CeeDee Lamb-like career arc and that they're similar. Do you agree?
Not with Geno Smith. That's one of those things, if you're trading DK Metcalf, why is Geno Smith even on the team? What are you trying to do? Because you're basically your assets going forward are you have a really good skill group and you have a good defensive play caller as your head coach. So if you get rid of Metcalf, volume goes up for JSN, obviously, but I think it would hurt him just because Metcalf's a guy that, complementary skill sets, creates space. CeeDee Lamb parallel is interesting. I don't think Geno Smith can.
Geno Smith is not Dak Prescott. Sorry.
Yeah. That's the issue I have with that concept. But I'm going to think about that more. It's a good question. It's going to make me think.
Well, another player that we need to think long and hard about is Rashee Rice, right now being drafted wide receiver 27. Evan Ringler, who's our head of projections here at Player Profiler, he and I had a ranking summit a couple nights ago, and we moved Rice down significantly below consensus. Dan Williamson, my co-host on Stack Hunters, vehemently disagrees with that move. He is more bullish on Rashee Rice, says for us not to worry about the injury, that any possible suspension won't impact him too much. And you just have to build around the possibility that Rice misses a couple games in 2025 and you'll be okay. Is that the right move? Is that how you should approach Rice? Or are you going to side with Evan Ringler and myself and say, yes, we need to move Rashee Rice much lower in our rankings, because you could have Xavier Worthy only like 6 spots ahead of Rice in the ADP?
Good question. I'm with you on the Worthy component. I would still rather have Worthy, but here's my pushback on Rice. I don't know how long he's going to get suspended, but it would be shocking if he doesn't. They almost always suspend players the year after these events happen. The injury thing is the one. I'm not a doctor. That's one of the reasons I wish they could turn the injuries off, because it's just one more thing I have to learn. And that I don't know. I don't have a take on that. But the one thing I do have is Travis Kelce's thought about retiring, which says it all.
Right.
He's no longer quite what he was, which is, what is he going to be, 35 this year?
Yeah.
And Rice, that, operating out of the slot, the slant roll, some of the volume he saw was just outrageous. So in a tournament, especially like a full PPR tournament, I'm going to probably hold my guns on Rice, take him at ADP. In half PPR, less likely. In a season-long redraft league, I'm going to probably pass.
Season-long redraft league, I think he's worth stashing just on the IR.
Sure, but not like if you have to take him in the 4th round or the 5th round. That becomes tough.
But I think in redraft
100%.
he'll drop a little bit more.
Yeah, you're right.
I think that right now in the best ball streets, like, he's getting pushed up because of that format too.
Yeah, you're right.
So
and plus normal people are afraid of injuries more than lunatics like us. So
we can lean into that a little bit.
So yeah, like if he's going in the 7th round, like he's 100% the guy that when you get him in week 6 and he's a full go, that you're now in the driver's seat. Agreed.
Easy. All right, Ryan. Last question of the night. What's the move with Keon Coleman? Because he busted in year 1, early 2nd round draft capital, was hopefully going to be the Gabe Davis plus replacement type of player. But also, I know this is primarily a wide receiver discussion, but we were also hoping for a Dalton Kincaid breakout in 2025. Didn't happen. Are these must-draft players for Buffalo, or are we going to avoid them because they didn't hit in 2024?
Well, I'm going to draft Coleman, and the reason is, Josh, I don't think, actually, let me backtrack a little bit here, Brad. I think he's better than Gabe Davis.
Yes.
And the thing that I like, which is what turned me on in a Gabe Davis before he peaked in Buffalo, is that Josh Allen's already targeting this guy in the red zone with complete confidence, like giving him 50-50 balls, things of that nature. So I think he has 10 touchdown upside, which is bold, but I think it's there. So I'm taking him. And with Kincaid, I once told Dwayne McFarland that I should consult a priest about my tight ends because I need an exorcism, because I will 100% get hurt again. 100% get hurt again. It's year 3 for a 1st-round pick. They drafted him to be their Travis Kelce. I'm willing to lose with where he's going at. What is it? ADP 131. Yeah, I'm willing to take a hit on that.
Well, Ryan, we're gonna call it for tonight.
Okay.
It's been great. It's machine. Ryan Reynolds, Bradley Stalder. Until next time, everyone. Good luck in the fantasy football streets.